I'm here today with Andy Findon, who is one of the most in-demand session players. I think that's fair to say, certainly in the UK and also worldwide. Andy, thank you very much for coming and talking to us today. And you're going to tell us all about the flute family. So let's start back at the beginning. How old were you when you started playing the flute?
9. I remember because it was the end of primary school. There were only 2 people who wanted to do music in the school. The other was a flute player. So we both started playing the flute.
Great. Okay, and what attracted you to that instrument initially?
Family, I lived in a house where my dad is a musician.
Yeah.
And he's a clarinet and sax player, and he had flutes. He played flute. So my brother was playing the clarinet. It seemed obvious I would play the flute.
Okay, great. And then as you grew older, you decided at some point when you were a teenager that you wanted to be a professional flautist? Or at what point did you realise that you wanted to make this a career?
Pretty early on. So when you start doing music at school, I never learnt within the schools. I always had private teachers. I don't know if that was a kind of snobby thing from my parents, but you isolate yourself. You have to, if they want you to take part in the school concert or the school show, you don't do scouts or you let off gym.
Yeah.
And that goes on now, and it's the conflict.
Yeah.
So you immediately feel you're slightly different.
Yeah.
And the fact of standing in front of the school, playing a bit, you perform.
Yeah.
You go into a slightly different world, the performing world.
Yeah.
And so I decided pretty early on it was cool.
Okay.
I wanted to do it.
Great. Okay. So let's talk about the history of the flute. So people may know a little bit about the way that the fingering system's developed on things like the clarinet, saxophone, French horn, things where you've had. So with some of the brass instruments, you have different lengths of tubing that's then selected by pushing valves and things. How did the fingering and pad system develop on the flute?
Well, the flute's one of the oldest musical instruments because it's very natural. If you take a piece of bamboo and you make a hole and you can blow and get a noise out of it.
Yeah.
The holes develop, I think, 3 at first to make the different tones, and then obviously our hands are designed that these 3 on each hand are the most active.
Yeah.
And so when maybe later in the day we talk about ethnic instruments and very basic instruments, the penny whistle, the Indian flute, they generally start with 6 holes.
Okay.
When you start making the pitches bigger and the length of the tube becomes bigger, it's physically almost impossible. And there are Indian, maybe it's like mythology or historical, but to play the really big flutes, if a kid showed potential, the hand would be operated on to make the stretch bigger, to cover bigger holes.
Okay.
A bit like the Chinese foot binding system.
Right, okay.
But obviously modern key work has developed so that rods, you hit one finger up there and the rod at the other end will go down.
Right.
I shall show you on a tube.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Just take it. Maybe this will show up better because it's black. This is the first flute I ever had. So by hitting immediately, I'm fingering that finger, but that key is going down.
Okay.
So you're having, and if I finger that one, there's one up there that's going.
Okay.
So the sheer length of it, you're still based around the 6, but there's all these things put on to assist you.
Right, okay.
And this is an old English flute. I think the piccolo is... Yeah, I think this is about 1908, 1909 it was built.
Wow, right.
And these were still in common use, 50s or 60s. When I started learning, the English players traditionally played these wooden flutes. And this is built in London by a company called Rudel Cart, which was Mr. Rudel and Mr. Cart.
Okay.
And a lot of the flute makers from today have developed from that factory. People used to go in and work, and a lot of guys came out of there and set up their own businesses. But Germans have wooden flutes, not to such an extent. The Europeans tended to go to silver quite quickly. The Paris Conservatoire schools in the late 1800s developed silver flutes, and the French sound has been more popular internationally than the English. Kind of, if you imagine the bowler hat, the stuffy English sound.
Yeah.
That's what we did until the 50s or 60s.
And that would have been across all genres, so orchestral players.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wish I knew more about it, but I've got a flute here which I bought recently, which was built by one of the greatest English flute players. It was built for him in 1950. He used to play on one of these.
Yeah.
He would have grown up, I think he grew up in Liverpool, a guy called Geoffrey Gilbert. And he was playing these in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
And then during the war, obviously people went abroad, there was more movement. He came back from France having realised there was this different style. Someone told me that a lot of the Hollywood film composers wanted this French sound.
Right.
It was brighter rather than the English orchestral thick noise.
Okay.
And so he came back and he bought a platinum tube from France, which is this tube. So that element of it is platinum.
Okay.
There's a silver barrel on because a guy called Charles Morley put very old keys. The keys on this flute are possibly older than this.
Ah.
So he took the keys off a very old French flute and stapled them back on, glued them back on to a platinum tube.
Right.
So it gave this bright modern sound. In 1950 it was revolutionary that an English guy should be making this noise in an orchestra.
Okay. Is it just? Can we interrupt the?
Yeah.
Just to have a listen to the two sounds. I think that would be really interesting. Okay. Very interesting.
There is an obvious brightness to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And if you're going to saw around at the top, this is a sweeter sound.
Yeah.
Although I found when an instrument is really well made, both the top end and the bottom end become easier to play. It's like having a car. You got a Ferrari, it idles beautifully as well as roars.
Yeah.
So that will roar. Either it goes quieter and softer,
Yeah.
and the bits in between are easier to do.
Okay.
You have to blow quite hard to make that go.
Right. Okay. Okay. And why is that? Is it because of the density of the tube that is actually resonating?
Yeah,
or
people are now making perspex, plastic. There's a plastic piccolo there somewhere, which they work because the position of the holes are very critical. And if everything's the right shape and the right position in relation to itself, it's going to work. So you can build. There are some very, very good plastic instruments, clarinets and flutes now.
Yeah.
But the quality of the metal is something different. I mean, a silver flute is a bright, ringing sound.
Yeah.
But metal. And there's a third one here, which is, they nearly rolled. This is a modern Japanese flute.
Right.
It's by Pearl, and I'm sponsored by Pearl. I'm a Pearl International Artist, they call it.
Yeah.
And I had this flute, which was I'm able to play it. It's a beautiful 14 karat gold flute, and the key work is brand new, and it feels like a beautiful new Rolls Royce key work.
Right.
And I've had it for about 10 years. It's in beautiful condition, whereas both of these older flutes need tender care.
Okay.
They need more looking after.
Yeah.
I get pleasure out of playing all of them. You can't compare and say that's better. They do different things.
Yeah.
I tend to use that a lot less because a lot of people judge with their eye. They listen with their eyes.
Yeah.
And if you're playing a shiny flute, you watch a video of the Berlin Phil or something, it's gorgeous to see the gold. It's a visual image.
Yeah.
The platinum doesn't look like anything, but that is actually worth more financially than the gold.
Right, okay.
It's got a gold head joint. I don't think he ever brought back enough platinum in the tube to make the head joint. So this head joint was put together. It's a very old English tube, gold tube, which would have been maybe new at the time, 50s, and that's a perfect working head joint for a modern flute.
Okay.
But put on a very old system.
Okay. And since the kind of the 50s when the keywork kind of changed, would that be the last time it changed, or have people continued to refine?
The keywork really stopped changing at the beginning of the 20th century.
Oh, did it? Right, okay.
It was definitive. A chap called Boehm, Theobald Boehm,
okay,
German, developed these systems. And no, this is remarkably similar to the modern flute.
Yeah.
Very, very few changes.
Okay.
A lot of modern flutes have, you can see these have got open holes.
Yeah.
So that your fingers have to sit very precisely over. Whereas that's the closed hole system.
Okay.
So you could almost miss.
Yeah.
And they'll still work.
So why have the open holes? Is that for being able to...
Well, uncynically, it makes you play better because
right.
you're being a lot more careful about your finger positions.
Okay.
You have to be a lot more precise. And the contact with the skin through the holes, you can feel the air rushing. It's a nice feeling.
Okay.
And I've got silver flutes at home with closed holes. They work very nicely.
Okay.
But,
okay.
But these are my favourites.
Okay. So you would pick one for let's say you were recording on a film score or something like that. Would you look at cue by cue and think, well, I'm going to use this one for this cue because
I generally only take one instrument out.
Right. Okay.
These are obviously valuable items, and
yes.
You don't normally want to carry too many of them around. We've got a very good friend of ours who's principal in the London Orchestra who got one stolen near the festival hall recently.
Right.
And it's heartrending. Yeah. You often hear of stories of instruments being stolen.
Yeah.
People don't often appreciate the value of what they're stealing.
Yeah.
Because it's also, if that having belonged to this gentleman Geoffrey Gilbert.
Yeah.
It's a museum piece apart from being a fully functioning modern tool that I use. But that's got a, what's the word of it? Provenance.
Provenance. That's a good word. Yeah.
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 Yes.
Okay.
No, I don't. I go out to play. I'd be happy to sit playing that or that.
Yeah.
They're slightly different. Sometimes I change head joints. I prefer the head joint on that, and it works very well on this. I'm really, really lucky because very often the flutes are slightly different in their diameter at the top, and you can't interchange head joints.
Right.
I just struck gold with this, literally, because both of these, I can move the head joints around.
Okay.
And that's not as good as that one.
Okay.
But putting that head joint on that flute brings it to the life of that one.
Okay.
And as we may see later, there are other head joints which you can use on the flute. Unfortunately, I can take either and it's going to work.
Yeah. And is it similar to kind of trumpet mouthpieces and bows and things like that? Are there ranges of head joints that have slightly different characteristics or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
A good quality student flute, which you may buy for £400 or £500.
Yeah.
As a kid who's going to start working, start studying at school. The first stop he would make when he felt he'd got over a few grades and started working well, you go back to the shop and say any head joints that may fit this flute, and you can upgrade if the body's working really well.
Yeah.
You can go halfway to upgrading the flute to professional level.
Yeah.
By putting a good silver head on a tin, a nickel body.
Right. Okay.
And it will help. When I first got this flute, I had a silver head to go on here.
Okay.
Because that when the English first started thinking, hello, the French are playing a bit brighter and louder, well, I don't want to get rid of the whole flute. So I did have a silver head joint which fitted on this.
Okay.
And that's the instrument I used when I was in the National Youth Orchestra when I was 15, 16. I didn't use this head joint.
Yeah.
I used a metal head joint on it. And that's where you first start meeting people, and that's where some of those people still remember me having this flute, which is why I could never get rid of it. So you become very attached to instruments.
Yeah.
They become very personal.
Yeah.
And we did a prom in the early 70s where the Shostakovich 15, we did the UK premiere of his 15th Symphony, and it started with a flute solo. And I played it on this. Wow. I can remember it. You never forget things. Down the bottom, that piece of music gets quite difficult. So it goes down the bottom, which is really difficult on this old flute.
Yeah.
But if you've got a modern flute,
okay.
you can articulate a lot easier at the bottom of a modern flute.
Okay.
When I was 15, I rose to the challenge on this.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't afford these.
Yeah. Okay, so it kind of leads us into the physics, I guess, of what's actually happening. So I'll
go back to one flute on my lap.
Okay, yes, let's go.
And have a shot.
Nervous about the very valuable.
I
rolling.
Did have an accident last Christmas. I dropped the platinum.
Right.
And being platinum, it's landed really badly, and it got bent, and I had to have it rebuilt.
Right.
The sentiment of having it rebuilt is difficult, but possibly it's better since it's been rebuilt.
Right.
Just had a modern craftsman look at it.
Yeah.
My bass flute once got caught in a big metal pit door, and it's got a couple of dents left in it. But sometimes the dents are the secret.
The magic sauce.
Yeah. Some people dent their head joints to make them work. Anyway, right. You were asking physics.
Yes. So, okay. So we kind of, I think most people watching this will probably understand the idea that as you're closing the holes, you're changing what's happening to the airflow within the instrument, and you're changing the harmonic series that can be produced and that. But what is actually happening when you blow? You blow across the hole in the head joint.
You blow from this end towards the other end.
Yeah.
And try and get as small a stream of air to break on the opposite hard edge.
Okay.
So you're sending the air across. If you send too much,
yeah,
you've got to hit the middle of it.
Okay.
And the art is to get that hole in your lip as small as possible, so that even with a gentle stream of air, it's shooting out very fast through a small hole.
Okay.
So playing quiet can take as much air as playing loud.
Right. So how do you adjust the dynamic then? What makes the difference?
I could cynically say blow harder. But the actual hole in your lip in the embouchure.
Okay.
When I went loud, I made sure I paused and went very tense.
Yeah.
But shouldn't say tense, but firm muscles.
Yeah.
To send the air out quickly and clinically onto the other side.
Okay.
And when you come to the end of a note and you start trying to make it go very quiet, if you don't look after it,
okay,
you'll drop down again.
Yeah.
So I'm virtually making the bottom jaw come up to meet the top, so that the hole gets smaller and smaller as you get there.
Okay. And are you increasing the speed as you're
I'm not
doing that
letting
as
the
well?
speed go. I'm
You're
keeping
keeping the same kind of.
Even after breakfast, you still got to get your diaphragm
Yeah.
to send the air up at the same speed.
Okay.
If you just stop breathing,
Yeah. I see. So I
you'll
guess
complete
it's
the job.
the same amount of air coming out and the hole getting smaller means that it's going to accelerate slightly, doesn't it? I guess. Yeah.
Same as when you start the note.
Yeah.
We help the note start by using your tongue on the palate.
Yeah.
But the note should start without the tongue.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm just opening the hole. And that's, in purest terms, you want the tongue to perform. But sometimes on a film cue, or coming in very, very delicately, that wind noise at the beginning of the note, which is what we're taught not to do.
Yeah.
Because very often you end up doing things, you're just on the hoof, think, well, that's quite a nice effect. And someone at the other end will go, oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Without knowing you've done it, and you try and recreate it.
Yeah.
As opposed to...
Okay. Interesting. So let's talk about the the wind has gone across and has split.
Yeah.
Now, what happens inside to make an actual note? What's going on inside there? It's a waveform of some kind that's been set up inside the tube.
Good one. I think I'm stumped there. It is just sending the air down to the length. The pitch of the note is by where you've uncovered the holes.
Right.
So when I just use those fingers, the air goes down to there and then will appear.
Ah.
So
Okay. So you can actually feel it coming.
it's more sonic. I don't
Okay.
think you can feel it. You can hear it.
Yeah.
And sometimes if there's something right down the bottom of the instrument, a microphone near the end,
Yeah.
particularly when we get to the bigger flutes, the giant thing there,
Yeah.
I would use two microphones if you're going to play right on the bum notes.
Right. Okay. So in terms of the sound projection from the instrument, I mean, I've always seen them mic'd from, maybe this kind of distance from above.
You would mic favouring this hole
Okay.
because you want to get the human element of it
Okay.
and a bit of the woofiness, the air that's going into it.
Yeah.
There's very little point. Well, if you're up far away up there, you are going to get a decent balance of it.
Yeah.
If you're close miking,
Then you want to concentrate on the headset.
I'm on a gig. If you're playing live and there's a mic, it's right on your nose.
Right. Okay. Okay.
I'm playing in a band.
And so for the bass instruments though, for the lower notes, you're getting some.
Can be helpful to have something down the end. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
But that's physical. I mean, the contrabass, as you'll see later, is physically distant from the body, whereas that's still within reasonable remit of where I sit.
Yeah. Okay. So covering the holes is effectively changing the effective length of the tube, and then kind of like an organ.
But that's really only giving you the basic.
Yeah.
That's where the holes are going.
Yeah.
How about all the other notes? Because you've run out of fingers. How do you get higher?
Okay.
You get higher by playing harmonics. Every note above that, another 2 octaves,
Right.
are kind of false.
Okay.
The chalumeau clarinet has got the 6 holes. I'll bring one next time. And it only gets those notes because on a clarinet you need a speaker key at the back to shoot it up 16.
Right.
We don't have a speaker key, we've got a diaphragm.
Right.
So one. So you join them together. It's like a trumpet.
Yeah.
So a trumpet would work with the very bottom covered. And they get closer together, the harmonics, as you go higher.
Yeah.
The fingerings that this Boehm system, which I referred to earlier, Theobald Boehm worked out this system where the keys all relate to each other. That the pitches all relate to each other. So if you take a D, get an A from it, the top D, that's the real F sharp.
That's the harmonic one.
That's the harmonic F
Right,
sharp.
okay.
Some composers write harmonics, and there's a beautiful Hungarian piece which she's actually using the harmonics.
Right. Interesting.
But we clean up by devising the cross fingerings that the flute has. You clean them up.
Okay, so that's to get them in
Pure.
tune, or
In tune and pure.
Okay. So it's the sound. So it's affecting the tone of the note as well.
The first octave are purely overblown. I'm not altering the fingers at all.
Yeah.
Then we start changing. Generally, you're having less keys down to make the harmonics.
Right.
Those harmonics also enable you to do kind of clustery things. You can pick harmonics out with different fingerings.
Okay.
There's a whole series of those.
Right. Is it multiphonics?
They're called multiphonics.
Multiphonics. Right. Okay. And how? So that's an embouchure thing as well as a.
It's an embouchure thing as well, but what you're doing is breaking. As you see with that one, I lifted up that so that instead of letting the air go all the way to there, by lifting that up, you just caused the air to break itself there in peculiar ways.
Okay.
So you're still holding down the bottom. You get two notes at once.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Okay. So right. So we've talked about the kind of the new versus old. For just to give people a kind of general idea, a ballpark idea of what these things cost, because people have an idea that a Stradivarius cello would be worth $3 million or whatever, or obviously depending on the age of it and the quality of it, and that you can buy a beginner's violin for £200, something like that.
Yeah.
So with a kind of good quality beginning student flute at about £400 or £500,
Yes.
What do most kind of professional orchestral players play? How much would a flute at that kind of level cost?
There's one very big difference. On the continent, generally abroad, orchestral players have more gold flutes.
Okay.
And it is purely financial, because our orchestral players are in the junior doctors scheme of things.
Right.
They're undervalued and not paid properly.
Okay.
And although many have successful solo careers outside, on a salary in an orchestra, you would struggle to buy your dream instrument, your gold flute.
Right.
on the continent, orchestral has turned into a political rant. A guy in the third orchestra in Berlin would not get off an aeroplane at 10 o'clock in the morning and go straight to a rehearsal. He'd have 3 days off because his salary is better rather than going into one. Whereas our guys come back from Madrid at 1 o'clock in the morning and you're on at Henry Wood Hall at 10 o'clock.
Right.
Because the money's different. And leave all that out.
No, let's leave it in.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we do, we struggle to keep the orchestras going. And yet, the last time I knew, that may be different now, but there were approximately 50 orchestras in Germany, and certainly about 15 years ago that was the situation.
Every town's got an opera house with an orchestra.
Right.
Maybe it's changing.
Yeah.
They must be feeling it as bad as we are. But it's always been the reason why we built up the film studios in the 50s and 60s was we were better at sight reading.
Right.
Because our symphony orchestras had the pressure to get things right on very little rehearsal.
Yeah.
Even now, when I tour with Michael Nymans and we pick up an orchestra abroad to do, there's a great piece we do about the MGV, the train, the French train. And we team up with an orchestra. And we arrive, and they've been rehearsing for 4 or 5 days on it.
Right.
Because they got the budget to do it. They've taken on a gig, and they'll look after it. You do that over here, and they'll have a 3-hour rehearsal with 2 other pieces in it.
Yeah.
And they'll do it. So our guys can sight read.
Yeah.
Which is why a lot of the films come over here, and historically started coming over here, because we were quicker.
Yeah. Quicker
and better. Doing
and also, I suppose you've got especially in London, you've got the pit orchestras, and you've got, we've got a kind of tradition of, marching band. I mean, I could say pit orchestras in the sense of the theatre pits, but also pit orchestras in the sense of, colliery bands and.
Oh, our brass playing is incredible.
Yeah,
because it's natural. My family are inculcated in it. My wife's a trumpet player. My daughter-in-law's a brass bander.
Yeah.
And I love hanging around at the Albert Hall on competition day.
Yeah.
I know, it's great. Good social. Flute players don't tend to have that. We have flute conventions. Brass band is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So
it's a rich mixture of different.
A lot of our
styles.
orchestral principal brass.
Yeah.
And the legendary Maurice Murphy.
Yeah.
Natural player. And Derek Watkins, bless him, both late, but they grew up in the pit tradition and both went one orchestral, one swing, commercial. Those two sitting together was the perfect combination.
Yeah.
We've got guys coming up, Phil Cobb, he's straight from symphony orchestra, Sally Army into symphony orchestra. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
So our brass tradition is good. Our woodwind tradition we're more sorted out now. There was this French-English thing. The clarinets have English and French. I'm a reed player as well.
Yeah.
And I've just bought a brand new English-built clarinet, which is the first brand new clarinet I've ever bought. I've always had French, but there's a guy now he's retiring this year, which is unfortunate. But he's the only guy making English instruments back in the tradition of the English clarinet, which is different. But you talk to a clarinet player about that, we'll move on. You said pit orchestras, as in West End pit orchestras.
Yeah.
There's a big cross-section. It's really difficult to pigeonhole people. Just because you've had a job at Phantom of the Opera for 28 years doesn't mean that's the only music you'll play.
Yeah.
And most of the guys are there because they're good and can do all sorts of things.
Yeah.
I get slightly alarmed at students coming out of college thinking, I want to work in a pit orchestra. And the questions are saying, well, could you play exactly the same music in the same way 8 times a week? And if that's all you did, how would you end up? Yeah. And there's this conflict between having a very well paid job and good conditions and having to deliver exactly the same thing night after night. It's an admirable skill. I've never done a show for more than 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
I tend to have to go, or it comes off and saves me having to go, because I can't see myself playing the same thing for that length of time.
Yeah.
Always
And
look for different things.
When people when people are playing in shows and people are deputising for each other, is that a way for younger players to get into the kind of the sort of session or the singing?
Yes, because more and more the contractors who deal with the shows also obviously fix commercial sessions.
Yeah.
And there is a cross-fertilisation. And you're meeting people. I work with people younger than my children. No, I had children, but quite young, no. But yeah, I'm sitting next to people who are younger than my kids, and I'm listening and remembering, and hopefully they like what I do, and maybe one day they'll give me a job as well. Because there's one thing in this business, there's no natural promotion.
Yeah.
You know, you've done 5 years, have some more money. You're only doing the job you've got at that time.
Yeah.
And if I'm working with someone who's 22 years old, they're earning exactly the same money as I am.
Yeah.
In that environment.
Yeah.
Depends which environment you go into.
Okay.
We deviated well off the flute and how it works.
Okay.
No, you asked me what they're worth.
Yes.
This is insured for into the late 20,000s, 26, 27,000.
Okay.
Because the value of gold, you could check online, see where the value is, and it'll fluctuate.
Yeah.
That wooden flute, to me, is worth a lot of money, but I think you could pick one up for 1,000 to 1,500.
Oh, okay.
They vary. I recently went to buy a flute with a friend of mine who was deciding to upgrade, and we tried a gorgeous silver flute for 11,000, and then she picked another one which was just 4,000 more, and the difference between those £4,000 was bigger in the previous 11.
Right. Okay.
It really is what you like.
Okay.
But you get a really top flute from 15,000 upwards.
Okay.
You go into precious metals and you go upwards.
Okay. And is that and these are at that level? Is it handmade?
Handmade.
Yeah.
Yep. This is a handmade flute.
Right.
I bought a flute for 1,500, which I'm very, very happy to use. I've upgraded the head joint on it.
Right.
But as a workhorse flute,
yeah.
As I said earlier, the holes were all in the right position.
Yeah.
Is in fact the flute which was developed about 20 years ago when they did copies of those old French flutes that I was talking about.
Yeah.
But made them in cheaper materials.
Right.
And the Japanese were really good at copying. They look and recreate it beautifully. And so this is a Japanese flute which is a copy of a very old flute.
Right.
And therefore works pretty similar.
Okay.
In a similar way.
Okay. And so then when you get into the higher prices, is it would the increase or the kind of the increase in the kind of tone quality
and the craftsmanship.
Right. So it's easier to play as well as sounding better.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You can, as I said, I struggled on my wooden flute for many years, thinking it was the sound I wanted.
Yeah.
The low notes were more difficult, and because I'd worked so hard, when I went on to a modern flute, wow, it was a lot easier.
Yeah.
It was easier.
Okay. Great. Okay. Right. So let's talk about technique then. So the first obvious thing to anyone who's picked up a flute, who hasn't obviously studied it, is that it's quite hard to get a very long note out of it once you've worked out how to get a note out of it. Now we talked a bit about how you try and produce a very thin stream of air. What are your kind of breathing tips for kind of managing your
for managing breathing?
Yeah,
that's the right word as I see it.
Okay.
Your body has a diaphragm and you fill your lungs up. If a layman, you say, take a big breath of air,
right.
That's not a lot of use for control and making it come out of a musical instrument. Yeah. So we work from the very bottom of the diaphragm area.
Right. Okay.
So the top doesn't move. The general rule is don't move the top.
Yeah.
So you've got a big balloon to build on.
Yeah.
And then you can control that air being sent out.
Okay.
You can control it less if it's from there.
Okay.
And above.
Yeah.
Very roughly how it works.
Okay.
So when you see the long notes coming up, there's no point waiting until just before the note and going because you haven't prepared anything, it's not there. So when you hear the clicks going, generally 6 clicks, tick, tick, you start working on the position, getting it correct, not talking at the same time. So you're breathing in. So everything's fully formed and ready.
Right, okay.
There are incredible exceptions to this. And I work in a folk rock band, and the keyboard player has just let us know that he plays the saxophone.
Right.
If he ever sees this, he'll kill me. But I've got such respect for him because I can't play the keyboard like he can play the saxophone. And we're playing together now. We've been recording some stuff together. And I'm standing there doing my breath control and getting ready. And my mate, I'm looking around and we're going to miss it. Bang. He's in. It just goes perfect. He hasn't thought it in the same way as I have. So I'm not dictating to anybody how they should do it.
Yeah.
It's how I tend to do it. Is to get myself ready, get the air, get the reed ready and go. Steve would just go, bang, and he's in. And it's fine.
It's got an unnaturally large lung
Doesn't half
capacity.
unnerve you if you're standing next to him.
Right, okay.
So, I have respect for people who can do other things.
It's like it's with singers as well. It's kind of common thing, isn't it? That you have to try and breathe in.
You're using your body, so you might as well have it in full control before you start.
Yeah. Okay.
Another thing I learned quite recently, if you take a breath in, I was very naive. There's a very good friend of mine who just pointed out to me, you breathe in, don't hold it. As soon as you've got full, start going out. So try and time it. There's no point going...
Right, okay.
Because an awful lot has happened in those 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So I now am very conscious of making it a circular... So straight out.
Yeah.
So I'm not wasting body energy. Also, when I used to stand up, my mum came to see me do a flute concerto when I was about 15, 16, and she spent the whole time worried I was going to fall off the podium.
Blackout.
Because no, you're actually falling off because a lot of...
Oh, I see. Right, okay.
I've tried to cut out a lot of bodily... It
energy.
looks good. That's not great.
Yeah.
Once again, though, I've sat next to principal flutes who make the most ridiculous bodily movements, and yet their sound and their approach is so smooth.
Yeah.
Personally, I now choose not to move quite so much.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to wear my body out in other ways. I want everything to come through the flute.
Right.
So,
okay.
Once again, each to their own.
Okay.
Blacking out,
you
only do when you're corpse and you're laughing. But I once did a saxophone quartet concert where somebody made a mistake and wasn't going to own up to it. And we carried on. And I do remember laughing so much while I was playing, gripping the mouthpiece, but passing out. And my mate said, your eyeballs rolled, but you didn't stop playing.
One final question which I wanted to ask you is that I've read some things about the crown and adjusting the crown. So if you could explain what...
Well, the crown,
means.
and here's 2 crowns, I'll show you the difference. It's just the ornamental, literally the crown is the ornamental bit on the top of the head joints. But under this is a piece of cork. The tube actually stops approximately there.
Okay.
And you adjust minutely this piece of cork. And that alters obviously the length of the tube. So you can make final adjustments. You check it with a stick, with a cleaning stick, which has got a mark in it, which must be halfway. So generally it's not mucked around with.
Okay.
Some people have invented different kinds of corks to attach to the crown. a light plastic one, they believe will have more resonance. With head joints of these qualities, I would generally trust the people that put them together to have them right. Maybe if I buy a cheap flute or something, you experiment with it, and it can add a bit of sparkle to an otherwise unresponsive head joint. To muck around with the crown. Okay. The old Barkus Berry pickup used to be built into a crown. Okay. That may be where your questions have come from. If you're doing a live gig and you've got the microphone plugged in the top, the microphone used to be put in the top of a crown. Okay. So once again, I wouldn't tend to do that to a head joint like this.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So something that it's kind of more instrument makers will
experiment
with
it. And it's lovely to have some people put diamonds on them. You can have an ornamental crown, but I'd rather spend money on food.
Okay, great. Right. So let me just move this out of the way. So in terms of the different articulations that you can play on a flute or that people can write for, what are the most commonly used? I mean, we've got obviously kind of legato, staccato, tonguing notes, or slurring them. What are the more unusual articulations that people can write that people may not know so much about?
There's something which we commonly call the chuff, which is quite an aggressive. Instead of which is heading towards a more ethnic-y sound. Yeah. And it can add a bit of excitement. You would have to specifically ask for that because we're trained not to do that. Because that's quite an easy way of getting... You're going to cover a lot, but we're trained out of doing that and making it... So it's very neat. Yeah. But I can see, obviously, it's quite exciting in an orchestral texture to have that. Yeah. Some extremes, orchestrally, Mahler had this amazing bells up effect, and with the horns turning the so that you actually got an amplified full sound, and the clarinets roaring at them, and you can really hear it when a section of oboes and clarinets bells up. Yeah, we're not able to do that. Yeah, but
that's your equivalent.
That's the kind of equivalent.
Much more aggressive. Yeah. Chuff. Okay. And we've talked about harmonics. Vibrato is obviously something that's very personal.
Yes.
To players. What's your approach in terms of deciding how?
Well, it's kind of what the mean is, what the default vibrato is. Yeah. Is what sounds pleasant and nice. You control the vibrato once again from the diaphragm. So you must have control of it. Every player must be able to play without vibrato. Yes. That's the hardest thing to be asked to do, is to play completely cold without vib, because your tuning must be 100% perfect, because you can use vibrato to mask little tuning problems. Right. Especially in a section, if everyone starts layering it on, it's harder to pin down who's wrong. Yeah. But if everyone plays without vibrato, it's quite a challenge. Okay. It takes a lot of control. Yeah. So once you've started without, then you can build back on. Okay. And so it's one of the most common things as an effect is to use no vibrato. It's cold. Yeah. Okay. And is that what historically people say, and as a kind of amateur clarinetist, I've heard people say, although I've never experienced this personally, people say that clarinets should never play with vibrato. The English would say that.
Okay, right. But that seems at odds with the kind of classical literature of certainly solo clarinets, unless you go right back. Certainly this century, people.
The great English clarinet player Jack Brymer. Yeah. He liked playing jazz himself. Yeah. And he would play Mozart with a cheeky veneer of vibrato. Okay. Brought it to life. He knew exactly how to tickle, but in essence, orchestrally, he would play without vibrato. Right. Conductors would be very specific. I've gone to England. I want it like that. Or in France, and the brass in Russian orchestras.
Yeah.
Tchaikovsky. It's almost like an old northern brass band here.
Right.
But a Western orchestra would play brass without vibrato orchestrally.
Okay.
So it's taste.
Interesting.
But it's really useful to be able to do everything.
Yeah.
And there are some flute players. I've been on work with somebody who said, please, too much vibrato.
Yeah.
Because it is too, the French hysterical.
Yeah. Well, it's that,
It's
it's
a caricature.
It's the Debussy, you know, it's that kind of... Yeah.
But without the vibrato and then adding the vibrato in.
Yeah.
My favourite vibrato in the world is Karen Carpenter,
Right.
who would start notes and then ooh at the end.
Yeah.
And if I wanted her interpretation of vibrato, definitive to me.
Okay. So it's kind of using it almost as a way to shape the emotion in the...
Don't just have it on or off.
Yeah.
It's something you've got control of.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And there's no specific historical...
I'm sure there are, but I'm not academically...
Okay.
For most of my answers are what I like and what I've heard, not what I've read.
Okay.
I'm not a traditionalist in any way.
Okay.
The French school or the English school. I like it to sound nice.
Yeah. Okay. How do you bend a note on the flute?
Well, basically, you're putting it out of tune, aren't you?
Okay, so you're actually rotating. Yeah.
Going the other way is a bit harder. Going sharper, you can't go as far.
Okay. Okay.
Or you go to a secret weapon, which I've got to show you later.
Okay.
Or now.
Stunt. Headstock.
Yeah, they're called head joints.
Head joints, sorry.
The different head joints.
Yeah, okay.
But that's a secret weapon.
Okay.
The holes never... One of the beauties of playing an ethnic flute is that you've got control over the hole.
Yeah.
And you can do things on an open hole instrument. Not this clinical open hole. That doesn't make a... You can only do that between certain notes where the holes are.
Right.
But on an ethnic instrument, you've got proper control. Sorry, that went better than I thought it would go.
I was going to say...
It wasn't meant to do that. That was pretty good. But it's kind of cheating with those holes.
Okay.
But when you've got real contact with a tube with 6 holes in it, you can bend notes a lot more.
Yeah.
And the freedom of playing a bamboo or a penny whistle, it's
Right.
nice.
Okay. And I suppose also the holes are pushing other pads down occasionally.
Yes,
which
mechanically.
which will interfere with
they're
it.
linked.
Okay. Okay, great. What are... So we've talked about phrasing for when people are writing for the flute and kind of making sure that they're writing things that are playable from a from a human perspective, breathing and everything. What are other kind of common problems that people, mistakes that people make?
You can usually fulfill what someone wants somehow. It's the degree of difficulty. If someone writes really, really high up and quiet and then wants it loud at the bottom,
Right.
that kind of extremity of movement is more challenging. So, that kind of big difference
Right. Okay.
is an extreme.
Okay.
And it's often worth pushing us to extremes. Playing safe, we'll usually find a way around it.
Yeah. Okay.
So, unless somebody's been particularly stupid and bloody minded, if you can see what they want to achieve, you can normally help them do it.
Okay.
So, I know I'm not going to criticise composers because if they've got it in their head, it's this unremitting. If they have used a sample and not given a space within it to perform it, that's where it becomes difficult.
Okay. So, and I think people... So one of the things that I try and do when I'm have a rare moment of being able to study something is to try and see what's idiomatic. People talk about writing idiomatically about and looking at kind of classical literature to see how composers that we admire from the last few hundred years have written. One of the things that people often say is that flute's very agile as an instrument, so you can play very fast. Does that? And you've just explained the problem going from very high to very low is going to affect that. But in terms of arpeggios and scales and things like that, and rushes,
it is agile.
Yeah. Okay.
And you're meant to have practiced so that everything's agile.
Okay. So that's similar to the violin, in that you've been playing scales for so many years that
and then Flight of the Bumblebee should be performable.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. So let's talk about different headstocks.
Head joints.
Head joints.
Okay.
Let's cut in there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about different head joints on the flute. And
okay.
How you can achieve different
Just
things.
go down to one. I would say that I'm pretty unorthodox in this. Most people, you play the flute, that's what you're going to get,
right,
as you've designed it. But I just became aware very early on that composers are always seeking something slightly different, slightly quirky, just to make their score stand out.
Yeah.
And so, not cynically, but I thought helpfully carry things around. And some said, well, can you play more woody, fluty sound? And rather than take a whole wooden flute, I may put on a wooden head joint. This is a bamboo, and the guy that makes these makes the most wonderful whole bamboo flutes as well. This gives you a different timbre, a more woodeny sound, and I've got some wonderful bamboo flutes complete made by this guy, but he's made these so that you take the top off that metal sound. And if you were to loosen up completely on it, you can get a more woolly.
That's beautiful. So almost like a kind of vintage valve mic type attachment to the flute.
Yeah,
it really rounds.
It goes closer towards what you can't get rid of on.
Okay.
And that's the real thing, but that's halfway through. So if I've gone out and I don't want to take all the flutes, take that, and I'm impersonating that with a metal flute.
Interesting.
Another one. This is a very recent invention by an American guy, Robert Dick, who's a fantastic flautist himself, and he's crafted an unusual head joint here. Like a dental application. It's actually a very nice head joint to play. So the difference between
expecting that. So it's got quite a meaty sound as well.
Well, it's a very good quality whole. He's designed it so one could play. So it's a bit of fun.
Yeah.
I wish I had more time to practice what it did, because I know it's got an awful lot more potential than what I was just showing you.
Yeah.
A jazz player would have a field day with this.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Okay.
So I'm very pleased with that.
Fantastic.
The most recent, here's one which, the shakuhachi, which is a, when we start playing ethnic instruments, and we mention, can you play a bit of shakuhachi, can you play a bit of penny whistle? There's guys who've spent their lives playing these instruments. I'd most probably repeat this on a further thing when we talk about the instruments.
Yeah.
We're pale imitations of people spending their lives developing skills on these instruments. And this is a shortcut to something which isn't going to give us half of what the real player would do. But it's a shakuhachi head joint.
Okay.
You can't do the finger slurs
yes.
I want to.
Yeah.
It's not allowing me to do it.
Fascinating, but it's you're playing. It's really interesting because I'm hearing shakuhachi style.
Yeah.
The way that you're blowing, and
but you're not hearing it slightly
but it's
restricted.
yes.
Whereas a whole thing with the fingers, you would approach in a different way. Once again, the time that I'd want to put into doing this and making that as responsive as possible.
Yeah.
I struggled when it first started. It's got a bit better because I've been playing it a bit longer.
Yeah.
It's like picking up all these instruments. You grab a saxophone or a clarinet. The time you need to really focus upon the instruments is frustrating that you haven't got. So when you're jumping between these instruments. So that's a shakuhachi.
Okay.
If we go to China, this is actually an Italian head joint, which I just got an email about it and decided to try it. Yeah. So it's quite a nice head joint. Open the little hatch.
Amazing. So
there's a membrane stretched. They gave me a little packet in case it breaks.
Okay.
Because on the ditsu, the Chinese bamboo flute, it has a hole halfway between, in that position before the finger holes, and you stretch garlic skin over them.
Right.
And have we ever worked together with those? I think I did them on the samples.
Yeah.
The really buzzy noise.
Yes.
They're limited, they've got the 6 holes.
Yeah.
So what this would give me on a gig is obviously full chromaticism.
Right.
It loses it up the top. Because my air's going so fast it's having no effect.
Okay.
So the top octave isn't effective then, just does the bottom 2. Every time I play one of these head joints, I learn more about what it does. I was here the other day with Christian again playing one of the others, and suddenly there was a revelation, I can do that on it. I didn't realise you keep, because the composer will make you push. That's why I never object to a composer pushing.
Okay.
Because you maybe you might learn something off it.
Yeah, okay. fascinating. It's kind of hybrid instrument.
Yeah.
It's because you can get just a different sound. It's it has the character.
Yeah. I'd like to work this into, because I do a lot of work with Jeff Fields, the pianist, and he's written. He's a jazz pianist, a classical composer, and he's in that edge where I can throw things in, and he's never shocked by it.
Yeah.
And I want to try some of his pieces using this.
Yeah.
Halfway through, changing the timbre.
Yeah.
I think he'll be into that.
As you're talking about the piccolo, shall we start with the piccolo? So I'll resist the temptation to move back a couple of feet. I know the one thing about the piccolo is that it seems to be certainly the loudest of the flute family. Is that an accurate thing to say, or is that just...
Yeah, as an impetuous youth, do you remember in youth orchestras, if you couldn't play first flute and get all the solos, then sit down the end and blow really loudly on the piccolo.
Yeah.
The unsubtle approach, you will get heard.
Yeah.
In an orchestra, the challenge is to provide what they want is a colour on top.
Yeah.
And you must reluctantly realise you are not me all the time on it.
Yeah.
Because they are quite lethal, loud instruments.
It's incredible for such a small thing.
Yeah. There are some beautiful pieces of music. Vivaldi wrote some concertos for piccolo,
right.
Sopranino recorder, or piccolo. We're not sure whether they were cross-blown or front. Because he wrote Vivaldi's work can be played on any instrument. He's most adaptable.
Yeah.
But they are performed on the piccolo these days, and the slow movements of and they're beautiful pieces in their own right.
Yeah.
This is a modern piccolo. It's pearl. It's by the same company as the flute, and the body's actually man-made.
Okay.
It's a wooden head joint on I won't say plastic. It's a man-made material. I think it's more sophisticated.
So this looks similar to the kind of student clarinet, like a resin or something like that. It looks kind of like that.
Most student clarinets are shinier, aren't they?
Yeah.
But I had a piccolo. Well, I've still got a piccolo, which is the same make as that flute.
Yeah.
Which was an old wooden piccolo from the 30s, and they're still used quite commonly orchestrally.
Yeah.
I just didn't bring that one with today.
Yeah.
This is an American instrument by a company called Haynes in Boston. Most of the flute companies, the famous flute companies, are derived they're settled in Boston, and the reason.
Is that the Irish connection?
It
right.
is.
Okay.
Yeah, became the centre of American flute making.
Wow.
And this is a 1970s instrument. Now Haynes weathered the storm of all the Japanese competition and everything, because they got the one major thing that they've got is the American forces.
Right.
They supplied all the instruments and have had the contracts for years.
Okay.
But I know they're undoubtedly incredibly good instruments.
Yeah.
And this is a beautiful example from the 70s of a metal one. I got this off an English colleague. A lot of he's since unfortunately died, but he retired. He was a guy who did an awful lot of television work, and these are really playable, nice, solid instruments. You wouldn't see them so much in orchestras, so they are a bit pipier. But the orchestral piccolo is normally wooden.
Okay. And then there was, so the man-made, or we won't say plastic, but kind of, all wooden and then all metal.
Yeah, right. They're the two norms. Or occasionally a wooden body with a silver head.
Right.
Once again for the same principle.
Yeah.
With wooden. But when a composer writes quietly at the top of the piccolo, you're asking that's the hard thing to do.
Yeah.
To play pianissimo at the top.
Okay.
And there are orchestral extracts which are monstrous to try and get around, and specialist piccolo players work at them for a long time.
Okay. And is the with the tuning and the kind of finding the workarounds like you do on the flute for ensuring that all of the notes are in tune, is that a similar thing on the piccolo?
Yeah, there's a separate list of fingerings which make things easier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
The next one down is very, very unusual in this country. was used. American marching bands use them.
Okay.
It's an E flat flute,
Ah.
so it's certainly shorter.
Right.
The main flute, and the difference between the piccolo and the flute is that the piccolo is conical. That's right, bigger one end and gets smaller.
Okay.
A flute is cylindrical.
Okay.
So, although this may play the same pitch as a piccolo, it's going to sound more like a flute because it's conical.
Okay.
So, although it plays quite high, it's got a slightly meatier sound.
Yeah.
We used it on a film last year when the composer had actually written off the bottom of the piccolo, just because it had been transposed in the process, but he wanted it to sound slightly meatier and not like a flute. I think it was a Hans Zimmer film, and I can't remember the title of it. Anyway, after negotiation and trying, this was the sound we settled on.
Right.
And we played it quite near the bottom of the instrument. So it was unidentifiable as a normal flute. It was just something different. Don't use it a lot. I've used it in a couple of Michael Nymans things. I think it's still awaiting its discovery.
Right. Okay.
Still needs a bit more.
You heard it here first. The origin of that was marching bands, was it?
Because it's in E flat,
So
it
fits
could
with
copy the
brass.
sax parts and the
Right.
brass, it's part of the family.
Okay.
So then there's the concert flute in size, the normal one.
Yeah.
Then an alto flute. And that's in G. When you buy a modern alto flute, they tend to give you two head joints now, because it's quite a stretch. If you put a normal head joint on, respect for a piano. This is where that physical aspect comes in,
Right.
because that
Right. Yeah.
is quite a tiring
Yeah.
posture. But the bottom note on the flute is. So we've got not a lot, 4 more notes,
Yeah.
but the quality of that opposed to
Yeah. It's
you've
much more
broadened
solid.
up.
Yeah.
So even higher up on the alto flute. It's been attractive commercially for years. In adverts and in commercial music, it's been a more attractive option than the flute very often.
Yeah.
That one's very dirty because that's solid silver, and yet there's a gold ring up there which has stopped that tarnishing.
Right.
But I have a terrible effect on silver. And this isn't the original head joint from this flute.
Right.
And at home, I've got another alto flute, which is the reverse of this.
Right.
Because I use the head joint on this one, on the other one, and the other one's all this colour.
Yeah.
It's a certain type of silver.
And is that something that
Completely
you can?
tarnished. Yeah, you can polish it and it'll look great for 20 minutes.
Right. And then just go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've got a friend who is allergic to, she uses a postage stamp on there because any contact with metal or silver or gold tarnishes her face. So, allergies. Wow. I must have something to do with silver. That's why platinum and gold are easier for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
But when you get the new alto flute, because of that posture,
Yeah.
they very often provide in the kit. It's the same length head joint,
Yeah.
but it just brings everything to focus.
Okay.
It sounds closer to me. It's
Yeah.
an audio blur. You're not used to it because you're used to it, hearing it at a distance. That's quite a nice head joint as well. And when children buy flutes, very often the first flute you buy will come with 2 head joints because a little kid doesn't want to stretch down.
Right.
And so you can play. And I had a friend of mine in the Philharmonia. She hurt her neck,
Right.
and for a while she used a curved head joint on a normal flute to just get around that problem for long concerts.
Okay.
And her neck got better.
Okay.
I've also got my friend in Boston has also made a nice bamboo head joint. Modern alto flute players want to make these things ring and make sure they're in tune at the top. Commercially, for me, I like the mud at the bottom of it.
Yeah.
That's what I feel people are looking for.
Yeah.
When they're going to write alto flute. Why?
You want the character to...
Yeah, you want that character to change, and that makes it quite extreme.
Right. And does that similarly to the concert flute with the wooden the old English flute?
Yeah.
Is that slightly more difficult to get notes out of?
To get focused?
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't articulate. It's more of a challenge to articulate.
Yeah.
And they're cleaner. Those head joints are cleaner.
Okay. And just actually listening to that makes it even more noticeable, the difference in when you're looking at sort of the C above middle C, playing round about there.
Yeah.
On this, the difference in character is quite... Yeah,
it's a different animal completely.
Very different, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, then the next one down, just take these away.
Okay.
I haven't missed anything on the way, I was just checking. Bass flute, which is double the length of a normal flute, and obviously curved round, and middle C on the piano is an octave above where this finishes. So that's middle C.
Okay.
Once again, like the alto, I'm always intrigued at playing these at the same pitch as the other instruments, because quite high up on this. And on the flute, that would be if I used the same fingering. It's a completely different animal.
Yeah.
And then particularly down the bottom it has the mystery that those effects you said about the extreme articulation, things like the chuff comes in on something like this. I grabbed all the harmonics and put them into one filthy noise and put it on the beginning of a low note.
You can almost hear it vibrating. Amazing.
You can actually feel it.
Yeah.
So I enjoy playing this in its own right. These are nice instruments. Yeah. This is quite an old one. Once again, the modern manufacturers try and make these more fluty, and every time I try a modern one, I might try it for a bit and think, oh, it's really really good and easy up the top, and it's much better in tune than this is. Do you feel that was very sharp when I just played that compared to that? But I would adjust it to compensate.
Yeah.
I like these old ones because they've got the fruitiness and the fluffiness. Maybe I should own two. I should own a clean one but I like the old fashionedness of it.
No, I agree. And when you're going for that kind of character, it makes sense to me to really go for it. And if you get that from the older instruments, it's
Then I've got one bigger than this.
Okay.
I think there's bigger than this. There's everything on the internet. You can find something bigger than that. And people have got extremely big ones. But this next one is the biggest what I've shot.
Okay. So that's the bass.
That's
we
the
just
bass.
Saw. Yeah.
Now, this, strictly speaking, is a sub-contra bass. No, it's not. Oh, the terminology. This is a contra bass.
Right.
Because there is a contra alto, which is double what the alto is.
Okay.
But this is an octave below that one. So it's 2 octaves below the normal flute. So I'll start at the middle C again. And this is what I said before about I'm now in, the mind is a bit screwed up because you're playing straight down and thinking of different fingerings.
Yeah.
That's the middle C.
The piano is actually out of tune at the moment.
That's an extraordinary piano.
It's just been moved from the other room, so it's...
Wow, I didn't know they could go that...
Yeah, it's dropped quite a lot.
I look for a tune on my watch. So, that's middle C.
Yeah.
That's the bottom note of the bass flute.
Yeah.
That's an octave below that.
That is amazing.
And this particular one, just to be awkward, if I went back to the ordinary flute, on the bottom of an ordinary flute, there's normally 2 of those keys on the foot joint, and it stops at the bottom C. But modern flutes have got an extra bit to give you a B.
Okay.
A lot of romantic composers started realising they could use a low B, and Mahler onwards uses orchestrally this low B. Some purists would want their flute to stop at a C, and very often you see in a flute case 2 foot joints.
Okay.
People will have one down to C and a B. And saxophone addicts might... Jerry Mulligan, the baritone player, would never play a low A baritone because the saxophone goes down to B flat. The low A on a saxophone is an addition, and people did it because the white notes on the piano, the low A on a baritone is a C.
Yeah. Okay.
So to have a low A on a baritone for big bands and everything was great. So you could have that. So that was added on, but a pure jazz player would not play a low A instrument, they'd play a B flat. In the same way that a lot of flute players would purely play a C. This has got the 3 as well.
Okay.
So this has got a low B.
God, I didn't even know that you could... I had no idea up until this moment that there was a flute with a low B anyway. So,
What, an ordinary flute?
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Never
But the low
realised.
E on an alto flute is
Yeah.
a better note than the low B
Yeah.
on a flute.
Okay.
You know, it's a better quality sound. So this... Now, the bigger the tube, the more chance of fun there is with it, because with a massive tube, you can... So you can have more fun and do different
and
things.
it's also incredibly agile as well.
Oh, it does.
As
You have to be a bit careful with the key noise. I carry 3-in-1. You just keep oiling the thing.
Right. Okay.
These rods do get a bit rattly, and this is where I would use 2 mics at home.
Okay.
Because the big quality of the sound is there.
Yeah.
If you add that in,
Yeah.
that really helps me to bring out the bum end.
Yeah.
The top of this is a unique sound. Last week was a weird week because I discovered both that and Christian used this. I think it was an Egyptian thing, and we needed just a sound which we didn't know what it was going to be.
Yeah.
But playing in the top register of this.
Yeah.
All that filth round it.
Yeah.
And filth travels, doesn't it? The purest sound will not have as much impact
Yeah.
as something with shit
nice
all around it.
Fizzy and
Yeah.
It's great. And it does give you that kind of ethnic character without being specific to any
Yeah.
kind of,
Sometimes, once again, the keys get in the way. You don't want, and this is the extreme of where your fingers obviously won't fit.
Yeah.
So even that one is doing that one.
Yeah.
That's doing 2, and they're a long way from home.
Yeah. But it looks. The layout. I'm just trying to work it out. It's the same layout, isn't it, as the flute?
Well, the
very, very similar.
The keys are for our convenience in the same place.
Yeah. But the way that the number of pads and the way that
Yeah.
they're positioned. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're just having to travel more
They're
extreme
just-
distances.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually like the key noise because especially if you put a bit of reverb on it and you get that kind of
Yeah.
sort of splash.
Well,
I suppose
I don't know how much we put in the Spitfire of the key noise of the sample. Did we try and clean them up? I can't remember.
Only when they were kind of really excessively.
Well, I think for the extremes, when we did the samples of the,
Oh yeah.
you'd leave as much filth in as possible.
Yeah.
And the key noise on its own is.
You get the notes. Yeah. You get the notes.
You could almost build one of those, beatbox tracks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Use it as a percussion instrument.
Wow.
Hmm.
Amazing. That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Andy, for showing us all of that incredible stuff. And I've certainly learned quite a lot.
One thing I did is I was trying to explain it. And when you try and justify what you do, you actually have to put it into words.
Yeah, I suppose a lot of it is just kind of natural, learned over the years. But no, it's absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you again to talk about specifically.
Empty out the rest of the cupboard. Yeah. I couldn't have got it all here today. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay.
Smashing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.